City Matters.
Welcome back here to hmTv. I'm your host, Rich Acritelli, and then today's the third episode with Jeff Brett here on the Fog of War and Humanity. We just got done speaking about some of his goals in terms of his business, his background, and the foundations of some of his workers and some of the ideas that they bring to his business, to the military, and their important customs that they follow. Now, Jeff, you have family members that served, and they answered the call, right? Literally during 9/11.
Absolutely. It's myself, when the day, I remember it like yesterday, and I was in Gold's Gym in Port Jeff when there was one. And when the first plane hit, I was in the gym and nobody really panicked. They thought it was an accident, and everyone thought it was an accident. When the second plane hit, I can't even, we all know, it was just quiet, the town, my work, the phones weren't ringing, nothing was going on. And, I had a nephew, Jason Spence, who had just got a scholarship for football. He was a big football player at Port Jefferson, and he was at Wagner College, in New York City. And he saw the second building go down, and it just changed his life. And he quit school and went in and signed up the next day, for the Army. And it really did set the stage, for himself. His brother joined a few years later, the Marines, and they're heroes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're real heroes.
And them answering the call continued your family's duty to service from one generation to the next. And the one thing about 9/11, and it's still true today, it was one of the longest days in American history because it kept going. Absolutely. You kept hearing those bagpipes. Bagpipes is a great sound. It's a lovely sound, but not during and after 9/11 because that's all you heard.
Absolutely.
And like where we live out, off of 347 and the main roads and Nichols and Route 112, all you saw was funerals, and that occurred for a long time.
Absolutely.
Now, what were the jobs that your nephews had done?
So my oldest one that joined first, and like you said, it went on not just that day, but for weeks, and the smokes you could see. He signed up and he was first MP, and he kept on going overseas back and forth. And it turned out he was a hard worker, a really hard worker. And he kept on moving up, in the Army.
Do you believe that came from his background? So what did his family own? That's kind of similar to your background, right? Your dad does what? The heating and air?
Yes.
Working with his hands, tough character?
Yep.
What was his father doing that wasn't too far from where you lived?
That's a great analogy. And, that Hawkins and Spence paving, which when I was a kid, they were the biggest, the biggest by far. And that was his grandfather, who was also served this country, in the military. Then his dad was Don Jr. He was actually married to my sister. And they had an asphalt business, doing driveways. And that's what Jason did as a kid, and he worked for his dad. And he had that mentality, and I'm sure from my dad, and also from his grandfather, that be of service when something happens, And when he signed up, at first, my sister was definitely, worried, what's going on.
Yeah, it's a tough time.
A tough time. And we were talking to my dad, and my dad was just like, there's nothing. My sister was afraid for her son. But my dad gave us a speech how there's nothing more important than serving this country and helping this country. And when he finished talking to her, I don't remember the whole thing, and I was with my sister at the time, we both walked away knowing it was not only an honor, but the right thing to do.
It was a necessity.
A necessity. And my nephew wound up going overseas quite a few times, and he wound up in Cuba doing interrogations, and he kept on moving up and working hard. And he's still actually in today.
My athletic director, Monty Granger from CompSwag, he did a podcast back here, probably March, I'm thinking, maybe April, and he was at Camp X-Ray.
Oh, wow.
And they lived a couple miles from each other. He was Port Jeff Station. Your nephew was what? Port Jeff, Mount Sinai.
Port Jeff, Mount Sinai. Yep,
right?
exactly.
And it's amazing that they were in Cuba handling the terrorists directly after 9/11.
Unbelievable. You know, and
it goes to show you, those aren't glorious jobs. Those are hard jobs, and you can only imagine. But if you're from up here, and if you remember, right, if we're coming here to Glen Cove and you're driving by Jake 58's over there by Nichols Road, you got that hill that you come down over there by the casino, and that was what? That was Charles Wang had his place over there at Computer Associates, right? You could see the smoke from New York City over there.
Absolutely.
And every time you drove over there and you saw the city, it was almost like you did something to somebody. And them being from here is a little bit different than somebody down south or out west or even in upstate New York somewhere, because we saw it. We saw it every day.
Absolutely.
And it was in the newspaper, and it was, reported in Newsday on News 12 and, Channel 4 and all the news. It just didn't go away.
Nope.
And they answered the call.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to believe that's going to be 20. This time next year, it'll be 25 years.
I can't believe that. That's amazing. And you said it right. When you drive over the expressway, and there was just a quiet in the air because everybody, you felt it in your heart.
Yeah, it wasn't something right.
Yeah. No, and the smoke and everything else, and just the fact that he joined and he worked hard, and he ended up being a driver at the Pentagon, security and stuff like that for the Secretary of Defense, and he kept on moving up because he worked hard, and now he's a 4-star warrant officer in the Pentagon,
which means he's a specialist.
Yes,
in that job that he has.
Yes,
you don't do anything else but that job, and it's a big thing. And I have to think it's got to come back to like your background, right? And it's got to come back to his father's background.
Absolutely.
Small business, it gets stronger every year. They take their bumps along the way, but they keep on moving. And I mean, when you see these guys, there's got to be a sense of pride where you look at them and
so grateful. And his younger brother joined the Marines too, and he was in for 7 years, Shane Spence. And it's just the pride that they did it. And something, I knew the Army from my dad, my grandfather, and other people did influence my business, but I didn't realize how much until you just said that. It's if you want to be successful in a small business, it's not about what's in it for you. If you think that way, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If you think, how can I serve, just like the military, how can I serve this country? How can I serve my customers? You join the military, it's not what's in it for you.
No.
It's nothing about you.
No,
it's how can you serve America? How can you help us? How can you help the countries we need help? What can you do to make life better for everybody else, not you? And when you run a business like that, it changes everything. And that is exactly where my 2 nephews got it from. My dad, their grandfather, their dad, is how can we serve? And Shane probably still would have been in, but he did 7 years because he got injured. He's on disability a little bit, but he's working. But he got injured in battle. And Shane and Jason, who's been there since 9/11, and it just, they built a life around helping others, and being proud. I couldn't be more proud. It's an amazing feat that they did.
Sure.
And I am proud of what they did.
Now, I got this question for you. You're growing. You're going to continue to grow. Do you ever think, this is like a little bit of a wild question, right? We're talking about the military. We're talking about the Marine Corps. You think about where they probably did a lot of their training at Parris Island. You have all these military bases. The one thing about military bases, they always have like an old foundation. It's like neighborhoods here on Long Island, right? You got some of the oldest suburbs in America that are here. And that's got to be good for you because windows and doors, it doesn't have to be a whole roof. It could be a new door or window, right? Have you ever done any work on any military bases in terms of like working on the barracks. Like where we live, we go out to Brookhaven Lab, you still have the barracks that are there. I mean,
we've done some around the country. I'm not sure other ones, but in West Hampton, the one that's related to the Air Force Base, we did some of those. And, you know, the people live in them. That's their houses and stuff like that.
And you have those old cement houses.
Yes,
they almost look like above the ground bunkers. You know?
And a crazy story, and I'm sure he passed, I'm not sure, but maybe 10 years ago, one of the original jet pilots lived in Riverhead, and I can't remember his name, but he was telling me stories. They converted like an old leather football helmet into the first jet helmets, you know, for pilots. That's how old, you know, he was an older gentleman. And he was just telling us his story, and he met his wife at the diner by the West Hampton place, you know, and he was in before World War II.
Sure.
And just such a great story meeting guys like that. I was so proud, and all he talked about, and his wife had passed away earlier, is it was the best time of his life being in. And he was a career Air Force. And
you know what the interesting thing about Grabreski? You look at the name Grabreski. He was like one of our fighter aces. He was awesome. Like Jaeger for like Long Island, you know, like he was just, you know, you think of John Glenn, you think of those big names, right? Alan Shepard, right?
Yes.
And Neil Armstrong. Well, that was Grabreski. Grabreski, he was at the end of his rope in terms of military service during World War II, to the point where he didn't have to go back up in the plane again. And he begged, I believe, to go back up and do fighter missions.
That's amazing.
And then he ended up getting shot down, and he was a prisoner of war at the end of the war. It's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
It's amazing, right? And that's, for us, that's a local. And anything that's local with that name is also national, you know? And it's amazing. And, you know, I know you love the history, right?
I love it.
And, you know, do you draw on the history in terms of your own leadership?
Absolutely. That passion that you just said, you know, he didn't have to go any more missions, but he still wanted to do another one. That, I feel it history, and I remember my favorite history teacher was Mr. Olson from Port Jeff, and I had him 2 years in a row. He went up in grade, which I was blessed for, American history and European history. I think that he loved America, and he actually would put uniforms on when he taught. And he would be, you know, whoever he was, talking about, whether it's Richard Nixon or a military.
You got your attention. That was true.
Got your attention, and he would imitate what was going on. And he wasn't a military guy, but he loved the military and he loved the service. And he would always talk like, when you guys do it, when you do it. And I feel that if you take that attitude, and your dream is a small business or whatever you want to be, but take that military attitude and put it into your life is going to change for the better. I think people that are unhappy, and I'm not even close to this, I don't know what a psychiatrist is, they're thinking about what's in it for them, or I need this, I want that, I need this. Is that even mentioned in the military? Anything
not really. No,
never. And that's the way life should be. When you think, how can I help my kids? How can I help my family? How can I help my wife? How can I help the people I'm doing business for? How can I help my boss if you're an employee? How can I help serve? You know, when people worry about what's in it for them, they can never be happy.
Yeah, they're lost.
They're lost. But the more you think about as you talk about it to your students, how can I help my students? How can I help these players? The more you help and serve, the more happiness you bring.
Now, let me ask you, you're in your truck a lot, right? Either here around Long Island, or you're going up to Westchester, or you're driving somewhere, right? Is there anybody that you will listen to where, you know, like I just watched something last week on Norman Schwarzkopf, and everything was about the soldiers and about doing a duty and making sure everything was taken care of. But he had just this, they called him the bear, right? Like you talk about your old wrestling coach Armstrong. They just have like a glow. There's just something to them.
It's amazing.
Right? It's amazing. You can't put your finger on it, but it's there. It's like Lombardi, right? When he spoke, the football knowledge just came right out of him. And he was a Catholic school teacher in St. Cecilia, teaching Latin and physics. You can't get any two harder subjects, right? So is there anybody that you will listen to where you say, wow, that's pretty simple, but it's some message?
One of my personal favorites is MacArthur. Yeah. I just love, and I know he was a tough guy and a little bit of an attitude, but I love listening to stuff. And recently the president of Vertex, which is what we're a part of, it's a big conglomerate that we're building. The president sent me the other general that led through, I don't know, I'm short. Patton just sent me what Patton wrote. He blocked out some of the wording, I was a little upset. I read it again yesterday. I was flying home yesterday from Atlanta, and I just read it. I have it saved in my phone, and I read his speech. It's so inspiring, so amazing that it's just, he can, how many years? 7? I don't know how many
81 years since the end of, was it 80th anniversary now? And then 81 years for I guess the Battle of the Bulge and Normandy and stuff like that.
It was a speech for the Battle of the Bulge, and it was just, if you can't
the weather speech.
If you can't get, I get goosebumps thinking about it now, and I read it yesterday on the airplane, and I feel like you read that stuff and what it's about and what they're doing. It's all about service and help. It's all about being injured and still going. Just to me, that's America. That's what built America.
There's a great story about MacArthur and Patton. They're in World War I, Western Front. Patton's running the first tanks. MacArthur is a division commander. MacArthur actually looks like that Prussian army officer.
Definitely.
Headed straight out.
Yes.
The cap is on his nose. He's tall. Patton, comes from a wealthy family. He marries into wealth, and that's all he ever sees is himself being an army officer. And they're on the same hill, and artillery shells are coming in around him, and they're both scared out of their minds, but they refuse to show the other one they were scared. Like a wrestling match.
Absolutely.
You're wrestling somebody, you're going to take a lump or two. This isn't going to be fun now, but you kind of stare in there and you try to do what you need to do. And it's amazing. Right. These were the guys that, kind of built America. They were controversial. They do things that you don't always agree with. But on the other side of that coin, they did a lot to strengthen the country. Look at where we're sitting right now. We're up in the Gold Coast here. These were the leaders of America. And they established the principles of capitalism and trade and strength and putting all of our resources together and being progressive in terms of thinking, right? And that's what you have to be. You have to be progressive. I'm not saying politically if you don't want to do that, right? But in terms of your company, being progressive with change and looking down the road and not being scared to change a little bit, right? And stuff of that nature. That's got to make you stronger.
Absolutely. Right? Without Patton and MacArthur, there is no Gold Coast.
No.
And that's the way they thought. And even how many movies and stories you read, those guys, MacArthur just standing up and there's gunshots going by. Do you know what I mean?
MacArthur, he took a lot of criticism for the Philippines. And one of the reasons why he was saved was they're like, we can't have General MacArthur because we're losing completely. That's too much of a trophy for the Japanese. Yes. We got to get him out of there, right? Get him out.
Which he didn't want to leave.
There's a man I know, he was in Corregidor, and he was standing next to MacArthur, and shells were falling all around. And he goes, MacArthur didn't even flinch. And that's like Ulysses S. Grant in the Battle of Shiloh.
Yes.
He's looking straight ahead, bullets are flying past him, and he's taking in what he has to do. And his aides go, General, if you stay here a couple minutes longer, you're going to get killed. He goes, I guess you're right. And he just turns the horse around. It's amazing. And it's amazing. And these guys are flawed guys. Everyone's flawed, right? But they learn from their mistakes.
Absolutely.
And it's, especially in terms of leadership and drive and stuff like that. So now you're only going to get bigger. And we said that in the last, right? And you're only going to get, but because that's through motivation, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, right?
Absolutely.
Probably always having a headache at some point, right? Now, you have a list in front of you. What are some of the things, the future endeavors or current endeavors that you're doing that is going to be something that also continues to make your business shine?
You know, our biggest goal is we want to be in all 50 states in America. You know, we want to be in every state in America and be the best.
How many states are you in now?
Right now, it's 24 states.
Wow.
And we're looking to be every state in America and looking not just to be there, but to be the best and the name you can count on and trust, just like the military. So
50-year warranty on your...
50-year warranty on the roof, which think about
And what does that do for the VFW?
Oh, my 50 years, I never have to worry about it again.
Right? How many generations of veterans are going to go in there and people from the community?
It's unbelievable. And one of the things that I was really blessed and lucky to do is instead of, you know, and I'm not insulting other roofers, you know, but they would go to the store or ask the customer, you know, what do you want? What do you want to use? For some reason, I was able to search the country always, even when I first started, to find the best products, the best things, you know. And right now, one of our materials we use is the best is the purple underlayment, which you saw. And it's for royalty, king quality royalty, and it's a purple. But we search the world so the customers don't have to. You know, we found what's the best, and that's why we can give 50-year warranty.
Yeah, it's the competition aspect of it, right?
So. Absolutely. You know, because I want to be able to give my handshake that this thing's for 50 years and you don't have to worry about it.
Now, what states are you on the fringe of operating in that you're thinking of now? Can you say? I don't know if you can say or not.
You know, all of them, but pretty soon New Mexico and also I can't think off the top of my head. Texas.
Like a Santa Fe, Albuquerque.
Santa Fe.
And the areas that are tied, right?
Yes.
Like my uncle lives in Arizona. I remember going there in like 88. There was just nothing out there. Now it's just thriving in terms of...
And that's what's going on. So what we're looking for is the best companies around the country that we can partner with, you know, and that's what we've been really lucky with, you know, when this whole thing started, you know, and really what it was for some reason roofing was really just fragmented industry.
When you started in Ronkonkoma, did you ever think that you would be operating Albuquerque, New Mexico?
Never in a million years, right. You know. When I first started, I was like, you know, I want to be able to hit all of Suffolk County. You know, if I can just hit, you know, let me just dominate Brookhaven town, and then we'll grow from there.
Get out on the North Fork.
We got out in the North Fork. We started going to the Hamptons, and we did
out here in Glen Cove, where we are at right now, right?
We did a lady, Mammy. Oh my God, I can't remember her name, but she was the driver for the basketball team from Bridgehampton that always won all the state championships. Yeah. And she said, if you do my house right, I'm going to get you every customer in Bridgehampton. And she did. Yeah. You know, and it's funny.
It's a big help.
It was huge, you know, and that was such a great feeling. And then we got to Long Island and Westchester and the boroughs, and it just kept on going. And when I hit my 50s, you know, I kind of thought, am I going to be able to go bigger? Because you're kind of like into it, you know, and my oldest son works with me, and he's an amazing salesman, and he helps the customers, but he never wanted to do my job. You know, never wanted to run it. And I didn't know where I wanted to go. And I met a place, Vertex, well, there was no Vertex yet, but I met these two guys, and I almost feel like they interviewed me. And they were asking questions about same thing we just did now. And then he finally said, Jeff, you know, what's your dream? And I said, my dream was always to be everywhere. And the guy says to me, he goes, Jeff, I don't know how to do what you did. I don't know how you went from zero to this big company. I don't know how you did it.
You got to have an immense amount of pride in yourself in terms of you're a local kid that did right.
A local guy that did it, and I didn't have an education. Yeah. And he goes, but I can take what you did and get you to $5 billion and get you all over the country. And that was the thing that
Are you guys out in California now?
We have one who in California, and it's just an amazing place, and they do really mostly roofs, huge roofs. You know, they just did all kinds of tile and stuff like that. And it's Action Roofing, and it's a great company, and I love to be part of that. You know, I'm going there in August to visit them, and to have these companies around and to be able to be partners with them is just amazing.
It's a great thing. Yeah.
It's beyond my wildest dreams.
And you're meeting a lot of great people. And,
it's amazing.
And you're able to share ideas and
I think
and even get stronger as a result of that.
You know why? And what you just said is probably, and it's what the Army, the services do. When we all get together, we're experts in one part. You know, and if you think you're expert in everything, then you're the wrong guy for the partnership. But I learned from all these guys.
But now you're Because at one time it's regional.
Yes.
We're here and we're strong. Now you're surpassing that, and you're learning what works and doesn't work in other areas of
Absolutely.
the country.
I was down, I was in Georgia, and just yesterday, and their whole thing is roof, the Georgia Bulldog roof.
Sure.
And it's just so amazing. They're like a brand that everybody in Georgia knows, and to be a partner with them, to be able to learn from them what made them great, it's incredible.
Now, what in your sheet there? What are a couple other things that you could?
So some of the other places we worked with is AHRC, of course. And they help Nassau and Suffolk County, and they've worked with kids with disabilities and stuff like that.
And that's something close to your heart.
It's huge. You're gonna be able to work with them. Angels of Long Island, Debbie, who helps out again with food and people. I don't know if you know who it is, but she's in Patchogue and Bellport. And she's helping feed people, who can't afford to get it, and clothing and everything else.
Immensely important.
She's amazing. We helped her out too, and feeding Westchester, and of course the VFW. It's just that kind of king quality cares is kind of what drives me right now. Do you know what I mean? I want to be the best in America, but I also want to be able to give back and help everybody. And that's been such a huge thing for us.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again. And thanks again to Mr. Jeff Brett and King Quality.